Once upon a time, one man spent large portions of his free time binge playing Kerbal Space Program. This series is the result. Hello everyone, I am Pepino here playing Kerbal Space Program. And last episode we placed return rods, which are like return pods, but are instead rods, onto the surface of Minmus, and we landed some rovers at our base, or at least very near our base. And here you see me struggling to learn how to control these things. This is the first time I've tested them in such a low gravity environment. And basically what's happening is the SAS is very, very powerful. And while I'm trying to drive around, the SAS is just trying to flip things, and I don't quite realize that right away. So the first thing I do is just start flying rather than driving, because these things are hovercraft and actually very easy to fly, and also very easy to drive once I learn what I was doing wrong. But anyway, yeah, first thing we're going to do is fly one of these rovers over to our base, and then we are going to put 2 crew members aboard, and we are going to fly over to the return rods, and then test those out and make sure that they work correctly. Now, I could just do an unmanned test, but, well, where's the fun in that? So, we are going to risk 2 crew members being stuck out in orbit or dying on return or something like that, in the name of science and testing. So we'll just park that out front, and we're going to wait until daytime to transfer the crew so I can actually see what I'm doing, and so that you can see as well. So there we go, daytime has come, and Luke and Hadzor Kerman it is now their time to test this craft. If you remember, they were the ones who had the craft break apart when they were trying to get up into orbit. So, take some surface samples back, just because why not, even though we don't actually need science. A little bit of role playing there, why not? And we will also grab Hadzor Kerman now, if I can find him. I remember then, he is over here. Actually, we had Hadzor, now we grab Luke. So here's Luke Kerman, and he will hop on and actually get stuck, and now almost take out the solar panel, because for those of you who don't know, when you are in EVA and you are directly above your kerbal, the controls get very messed up. But anyway, after a little bit of trying, he's able to board the rover as well, and we turn on the headlights, point ourselves towards our return rods, and begin to fly. So here we go, and I basically use this, like I said, like a hovercraft. I just hover low over the surface and use the RCS to push myself forward. The engines keep myself up in the air, and once you learn how to do this, it flies really nicely, and it's actually really satisfying to just fly this thing around essentially in slow motion over the surface of Minmus. And I try to get some cool angles on the footage here, be a little cinematic. So I do some nice zoom in, zoom out type of stuff, just because I think it looks cool. And now you may be noticing something that I didn't notice until right about now. I was falling towards the surface, and we blew up. Hadzor and Luke were ejected from their seats, and a pile of debris flying past them. Luckily, they didn't get run over. And we see here as Hadzor comes rolling down into a heap on the ground. Luckily, both survive, and so, yeah. I really have to pay better attention and stop trying to be so cinematic and cool. But I decided to just do a nice quick load because no one died, and it would just save me from having tons of extra debris everywhere. And I figure, hey, it was my first time flying, so we'll try that again. But this time I learned that if I'm going to fly, I should probably not stay so, not stay so low to the surface. So this time I actually get a decent bit of air and aim myself over there towards the return rods. And basically, yeah, these guys, I don't know what's up with them, but they had their rocket break apart and were nearly unable to get up into orbit uh, without dying the first time. And then this time they crash a rover, but they've survived both of them. So I can't tell if lots of near-death experiences makes them better astronauts or worse astronauts. I guess though in Kerbal standards, as long as you survive, the more near-death experiences you have, probably the better you are. So these guys are probably our best two Kerbals. Hadzer and Luke are their names, and they are a team. And so here we go. We're bringing this in for a nice, easy landing. And basically, yeah, you just kind of can land this thing slowly or keep your forward momentum and land it basically just like a plane, coming in really, really slowly and in really low gravity. And right here, we just touch down, little bounce, and turn ourselves towards the return rods. A little RCS boost to go forward, and there we go. And this thing is basically, like I said, just perfect for these lake beds in Minmus because it's nice flat terrain, and this thing works just really, really nicely. So here we see our return rods as well as the nuclear engine that has been left there when I got rid of the other stuff. And we can finally test these out as Luke heads over and gets in, and Hadzer decides that before he gets in his return rod, he should have a little bit of fun. So aims directly at the nuclear engine and misses, and comes back and hits it on the way back, knocking it over and sending him pummeling to the ground. He's a little disoriented, but then eventually he gets his bearings and places himself down on the return rod as well. So, once we activate all of the engines, we will be ready to go. It looks like our parachutes are already activated, or at least that's what it seemed like to me. So we are ready to take off now, and this thing is very light, so it hardly takes any fuel to go anywhere. But just look at this thing once it's flying. This is just a very fun-looking craft, basically. You can see them just kind of riding on it, looking forward with a little steel plate behind them. I almost didn't add those steel plates, but I figured it'd be nice to have a little platform to stand on before they get into their seat, as well as it kind of acts like a little make-believe heat shield when we're re-entering Kerbin. So, here we go. We make our burn to get out of Minmus orbit and set a nice low trajectory towards Kerbin. And basically we're going to be coming in pretty hot. So, what I want to do, I believe, would be, I would like to aerobrake. I think I aerobrake on this one, go around once. And so here we go, we are dropping down into the atmosphere. And yes, we are now coming back up out of the atmosphere. We went aerobraked a little bit. And the reason you do that is to slow your speed down, because I don't want this thing to rip apart on entry when we actually deploy the parachutes, because that would be bad, and that would probably lead to our Kerbals not surviving. So, after aerobraking once, we are ready, hopefully to bring it down. And so this time we will actually burn to the point where we are not going to skip off the atmosphere. And there are re-entry effects and the heat shields doing their job, keeping our kerbals nice and safe, because that is very, very hot. We are coming in very quickly as our parachutes deploy, and luckily don't rip anything apart. And we are now slowing down substantially, and it looks like we are going to land in some mountains, which is unfortunate because this thing is very tall and thin, and I'm guessing it's going to tip over, and thanks to the large fuel tank at the top, probably explode. But that was my guess at the time. We'll see what actually happens as we are now skipping down to about 1,000 meters above the surface when our parachutes fully deploy. But what's this? Both of our kerbals have been ejected from their seats and are now resting, unable to move on the heat shields that I almost didn't add. I literally had saved the craft, was ready to launch, and I decided, no, wait, I should add these things just to be, just to look cool, basically. And Luke is able to get back into his seat with no problem, but Hadzer appears to be hanging by his foot on the seat, unconscious. Just look at him. He must have hit his head on the heat shield or something like that. But if it wasn't for the heat shield, he would be hanging a few hundred feet or meters up in the air, and probably would have fallen right there. But he eventually, his foot falls out, but he is still, for some reason, unconscious and unable to board. No matter how hard I click or what I do, Hadzer Kerman will not wake up. And we are expecting this thing any minute now to touch down and probably explode, and we would really prefer to have him in his seat if he wants to survive this. But he will not get up, no matter what happens. I try to get a view of how close we are to the surface, but it's very hard to tell, as we're coming down kind of near a river, just on some mountains, but it's very dark and difficult to see. But we're going to land any second, and Hadzer is completely immobilized and unconscious. But all of a sudden, at the last second, he springs awake and is able to finally board his seat, where he will hopefully be safe, and he hardly had any time to spare. I was literally just about to give up on him and see maybe he would survive it on his own, but eventually he did get into his seat, and then finally our parachutes bring us down nice and easy on the mountainside, where we tip over and explode. And we zoom in, the smoke clears, and both our kerbals have survived. Hadzer and Luke, 3 for 3, 3 flights, 3 crashes or near-death experiences or malfunctions, whatever you want to call it. I don't know if that means these guys are the best kerbals or the worst, like I said, but they're certainly the most entertaining pair we've had so far in this series. Anyway, we get them out, let them stretch their legs back on Kerbin, and Hadzer takes a look at the damages, lucky to have survived. So, alright, there is that, as they both observe their surroundings a little bit. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and will like and or subscribe, or both. Although and or means or both. Anyway, I'm rambling now as we watch these guys walk around and get their bearings. But thank you guys for watching, and hopefully join me next time.